The first human broke my neural interface on a Tuesday. I should have known something was wrong when my cranial nodes started sparking during what should have been a routine mental subjugation. Commander Vex 9 had assigned me to process the latest batch of captured species from the Outer Rim territories, and honestly, I was looking forward to it. There's something deeply satisfying about watching another sentient being's will crumble under the weight of Zephyrian mind control. My name is Crix 7, and I have been breaking minds for the Galactic Dominion for 3 cycles now. I'm good at it. Really good. The Andromedans lasted maybe 30 seconds before their consciousness folded like wet paper. The crystalline Voltarians, please, their rigid mental structures shattered the moment I applied pressure. Even the supposedly strong-willed Centaurians couldn't resist our neural dominance for more than a few minutes. But this human, this stubborn, bizarre little creature sitting in containment cell 47, she was different. Name? I demanded, letting my psychic tendrils snake through her mind's defenses. She looked up at me with these strange, watery blue orbs they call eyes, and said, Mika Stone. And before you ask, yes, that's my real name. No, I won't tell you our military secrets, and absolutely not. I won't submit to whatever freaky brainwashing nonsense you are about to attempt. I paused. She had answered before I had even asked the other questions. How was that possible? My mental probe was supposed to extract information directly from her neural pathways. Instead, it felt like I was trying to grab smoke with my tentacles. You will submit, I hissed, increasing the psychic pressure. My cranial nodes glowed brighter, channeling more energy into the mental assault. All species submit to Zephyrian mind control. It is inevitable. Mika laughed. Actually, laughed. The sound was sharp and bitter, echoing off the metal walls of the containment cell. Oh, buddy, you have no idea what you are dealing with, do you? My confidence wavered for just a moment. In 3 cycles of mental subjugation, no creature had ever responded with amusement. Fear, yes. Desperation, certainly. Rage, occasionally. But laughter? That was new. Your primitive brain cannot comprehend the power of Zephyrian neural dominance, I said, more to reassure myself than to intimidate her. I have broken the minds of species far more advanced than your pathetic kind. Advanced, she snorted. Right. Because enslaving other people's thoughts is such an evolutionary achievement. Tell me, Squidface, what happens when you run into someone whose brain doesn't work the way you expect? Squidface. The audacity of this creature was astounding. I amplified my mental assault, pouring every ounce of psychic energy into crushing her will. My tentacles writhed with the effort, and I could feel sweat beading along my chitinous exterior. Nothing happened. Mika just sat there completely unaffected, watching me with what I was beginning to recognize as pity. You are really trying hard there, aren't you? I can almost see the smoke coming out of your ears, or whatever those twitchy things on your head are supposed to be. This was impossible. My neural interface was functioning perfectly. The energy readings were off the charts. I was channeling enough psychic force to dominate an entire Voltarian colony ship. Yet this single human remained completely immune to my influence. What are you? I whispered, finally dropping the mental assault and staggering backward. I'm human, she said simply. And apparently that's your biggest problem. I activated my communication implant, calling for Commander Vex 9. Sir, we have a situation in containment cell 47. What kind of situation, Crix 7? How do you explain that everything you thought you knew about mental dominance had just been turned upside down by a creature that shouldn't even be capable of spaceflight? The human appears to be resistant to neural control. A long pause. Resistant? That's impossible. Bring her to Laboratory Complex Beta. I want to observe this personally. As I escorted Mika through the corridors of our command vessel, she kept up a running commentary that made my skin crawl. Not because it was threatening, but because it was so casually confident. Nice ship, she said, looking around at the biomechanical walls. Very organic. Bit too much on the eldritch horror aesthetic for my taste. But I guess when you are in the business of enslaving minds, you have got to commit to the theme. Silence, I growled. Oh, come on. When's the last time you had a conversation with someone who wasn't mentally dominated? This has got to be refreshing for you. I mean, sure, your entire worldview is probably crumbling right now, but hey, at least you are getting some genuine social interaction. She was right, and that terrified me. For 3 cycles, every conversation I'd had was with either fellow Zephyrians or subjugated minds. The latter barely counted as conversation at all, since dominated creatures could only respond with programmed obedience. But Mika Stone? She was talking to me like an equal, like someone who had a choice in the matter. We arrived at Laboratory Complex Beta, where Commander Vex 9 was waiting with the full neural analysis array. Vex 9 was old even by Zephyrian standards, his cranial nodes scarred from decades of intensive psychic work. If anyone could break a human mind, it would be him. So, this is the anomaly, Vex 9 said, circling around Mika like a predator studying prey. Fascinating. The neural patterns are completely chaotic. How does your species function with such disorganized brain activity? Practice, Mika replied cheerfully. Also, coffee. Lots and lots of coffee. Vex 9 attached the neural analysis probes to Mika's head, and immediately the readings went haywire. Electrical patterns that should have been simple and predictable were instead jumping all over the spectrum. Her brain activity looked less like consciousness and more like barely controlled lightning. This is unprecedented, Vex 9 muttered, studying the data stream. Her neural pathways are constantly shifting. Every time I attempt to establish a control link, the patterns change. It's as if her mind is actively resisting our influence on a subconscious level. Not subconscious, Mika corrected. We are just stubborn. It's kind of our thing. Impossible. Conscious resistance requires awareness of the mental attack, and awareness should make the subject more vulnerable, not less. Mika shrugged. Humans are weird. We don't really do things the way they are supposed to be done. Take our whole civilization, for example. By all rights, we should have wiped ourselves out centuries ago. Wars, plagues, environmental disasters, reality television. But here we are, still kicking around and causing trouble. Commander Vex 9 increased the power of the neural array. The energy readings climbed to levels that would have instantly dominated an entire city of lesser species. Mika's brain patterns became even more chaotic, but she remained completely unaffected. Fascinating, she said, watching the displays with genuine interest. So this is how you break other people's minds? It's actually pretty elegant, in a horrifically evil sort of way. You are essentially overwriting their personality with your own commands, right? You should not be able to understand the process while experiencing it, Vex 9 said, his voice tight with frustration. Yeah. Well, humans are big on understanding things that are trying to kill us. It's a survival trait. Speaking of which, how exactly does this whole galactic domination thing work? I mean, the logistics must be nightmarish. Do you have some kind of bureaucracy set up to manage all the enslaved populations? What's the organizational structure like? I stared at her in disbelief. She was being subjected to the most powerful mind control technology in the galaxy, and she was asking about administrative procedures. Commander Vex 9 deactivated the neural array and stepped back, his cranial nodes dim with exhaustion. It's not working. Her mind is completely immune to our influence. Not immune, Mika corrected. Just incompatible. Your whole system is based on the assumption that consciousness follows predictable patterns. But human consciousness, we are basically running on organized chaos. You can't dominate a mind that doesn't know what it's going to think next. The implications hit me like a plasma torpedo to the thorax. If humans were immune to mental control, and if there were more of them out there, how many humans are there? I asked, dreading the answer. Mika's smile was absolutely terrifying. Oh, you know, just a few billion, give or take. Commander Vex 9's tentacles went rigid with shock. Billions? That's impossible. No species achieves that population level without either destroying itself or being conquered by a superior force. Well, we almost destroyed ourselves a few times. but we are really good at pulling back from the brink at the last second. It's like a hobby for us. As for being conquered, she gestured around the laboratory. How's that working out for you so far? I felt something I hadn't experienced since my first cycle of training. Genuine fear. Not the controlled fear that came from facing a dangerous but predictable opponent, but the deep, primal terror of encountering something completely outside your understanding. What do you want? Commander Vex 9 asked, and I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. Want? Well, personally, I'd like to go home, have a decent meal, and maybe catch up on some sleep. But professionally, I'm here as an advanced scout. My government wanted to know what we were dealing with when your ships started showing up in our territory. Advanced scout? The words came out as barely a whisper. Oh yeah, the human fleet should be arriving in this system in about, I'd say 6 hours. Maybe 7, depends on how long it takes them to finish mopping up your forward positions in the Kepler sector. My world collapsed. The Kepler sector was supposed to be impregnable. We had 3 battle fleets stationed there, plus mental control over the entire civilian population. If the humans had broken through, you are lying, Commander Vex 9 said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? You have got sensors, right? Why don't you check for yourself? Vex 9 activated the long-range detection array, and within moments the displays were showing energy signatures consistent with a massive fleet movement. Ships. Hundreds of ships, all heading directly for our position. How? How did your species defeat our mental control on such a massive scale? Mika's expression grew serious for the first time since I'd met her. Because you made one fundamental mistake. You assumed that consciousness was something to be conquered. But for human, consciousness isn't just what we are, it's what we fight for. She stood up, somehow making the simple action seem like a declaration of war. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not our technology, though that's pretty impressive. It's not our numbers, though there are a lot of us. It's the fact that we would rather die free than live as slaves. And when you threaten that freedom, the lights in the laboratory flickered as the first human ships dropped out of hyperspace. Well, Mika said, with that terrifying smile, you get to find out exactly what organized chaos looks like when it's really, really angry. Commander Vex 9 was frantically trying to establish communication with our fleet commanders, but I could see the growing panic in his movements. Our entire civilization was built on the premise that we were the apex predators of consciousness itself. We had never encountered a species that could resist our mental dominance, let alone one that could turn that resistance into a weapon. This changes everything, I whispered. No kidding, Mika replied. But hey, look on the bright side. At least now you know what it feels like to have a conversation with someone who isn't your mental slave. Personal growth. Am I right? As the human fleet began broadcasting surrender demands across all frequencies, I realized that Mika Stone wasn't just immune to our mind control. She was something far more dangerous. She was hope, weaponized. The first human warship to decloak was absolutely beautiful in the most terrifying way possible. Where our vessels were organic curves and biomechanical integration, theirs was all sharp angles and brutal efficiency. No artistry, no aesthetic consideration for the beauty of conquest, just pure, undiluted function designed for one purpose, killing things very, very effectively. Well, Mika said, watching our sensor displays with professional interest, looks like Captain Torres made good time. I told her you guys would probably want to chat once you realized what you were dealing with. Commander Vex 9's cranial nodes were flashing in distress patterns. I'd never seen before. This is impossible. Our intelligence indicated that humanity was barely capable of interstellar travel, primitive chemical rockets and basic fusion drives at best. Oh, we were. About 6 months ago. Mika's casual tone made my blood freeze. Funny thing about humans, though, put us under pressure, and we innovate really, really fast. Especially when someone starts enslaving our colonies. 6 months. They had gone from primitive spaceflight to challenging the Galactic Dominion in 6 months. The communication array crackled to life, and a new human voice filled the laboratory. Female, crisp, with an accent I couldn't place, but that somehow conveyed absolute authority. Zephyrian vessel, this is Captain Elena Torres of the Human Defense Fleet. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender, immediately, or we will demonstrate why threatening human consciousness was the worst mistake your species has ever made. Command of X9 straightened, drawing on cycles of military conditioning. Human fleet, you are trespassing in Dominion space. Withdraw immediately, or face the consequences. Consequences? The human captain's laughter was sharp enough to cut steel. Commander, you have been enslaving sentient beings for centuries. The only consequences here are going to be yours. You have 30 seconds to lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. We have mental dominance over 47 different species across 12 star systems, Vex-9 replied, his voice gaining strength. Your primitive minds cannot comprehend the scope of our power. Actually, we have been doing the math on that. Captain Torres sounded almost bored. 47 enslaved species, you said. That's approximately 400 billion sentient beings held against their will. Interestingly, our preliminary scans suggest that your mind control has an effective range of about 50,000 kilometers from your control ships. My tentacles went cold. How could they possibly know our operational parameters? Scout Stone, Torres continued. Are you still alive down there? Present and accounted for, Captain. Mika replied cheerfully. These folks have been very educational. Did you know they literally cannot comprehend the concept of consensual governance? It's like trying to explain quantum mechanics to a rock. Noted. Commander Vex-9, was it? Here's what's going to happen. We are going to disable your control ships one by one, starting with the largest concentrations. Every time we knock out one of your neural dominance arrays, thousands of enslaved beings are going to remember who they used to be. And Commander, Vex-9's entire body was trembling now. What? They are really angry. The first explosion lit up our sensor array like a newborn star. One of our control ships in the outer system had just been reduced to component atoms. Then another. Then 3 more in rapid succession. Impossible, I whispered. Our shield should be impenetrable to primitive human weapons. Yeah, about that, Mika said, settling back in her chair like she was watching entertainment. Remember how I mentioned we innovate under pressure? Well, turns out that mind control technology of yours, it works by manipulating quantum neural resonance patterns. Very elegant. Also, very vulnerable to quantum disruption fields. More explosions. Our fleet was being systematically destroyed, and I couldn't understand how. See, here's the thing about humans, Mika continued, her voice taking on an almost educational tone. We are really good at taking other people's technology and figuring out how to break it. It's kind of our specialty. Your ships are basically broadcasting their control frequencies across subspace. All we had to do was reverse the polarity, and a massive detonation shook our command vessel. Warning lights flashed as secondary systems began failing. And now every enslaved population in this system is about to remember what freedom feels like, Mika finished. The communication array sparked back to life. But this time it wasn't Captain Torres. It was voices. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The formerly enslaved populations were coming online, and they were not happy. Zephyrian scum. The voice was harsh, mechanical, Voltairean. You will pay for what you have done to our children. 300 cycles of slavery. Another voice, musical and ethereal. Andromeda. 300 cycles of stolen thoughts and murdered dreams. We remember everything. A third voice, deep and resonant. Centurion. Every moment of our imprisonment. Every violation of our consciousness. Commander Vex-9 was backing away from the communication array, as if it were a venomous creature. This cannot be happening. The mental conditioning should prevent them from acting against us even if the control links are severed. Should, would, could, Mika said with a shrug. You know what your problem is? You never actually understood consciousness. You just figured out how to suppress it. But consciousness isn't something you can permanently delete. It's like water. It always finds a way through. The voices were getting louder, more coordinated. I could hear weapons charging, ships moving, entire fleets of the formerly enslaved converging on our position. You know what the really funny part is? Mika asked, and her tone had shifted to something darker, more dangerous. You could have been the greatest civilization in galactic history, telepathic species, with the ability to share thoughts and experiences across vast distances. You could have connected every conscious being in the galaxy in a network of mutual understanding and cooperation. She stood up, and suddenly she didn't look like a prisoner anymore. She looked like a judge delivering a verdict. Instead, you chose slavery. You took the most beautiful gift in the universe, the ability to touch another mind, and you turned it into a weapon of oppression. And now every species you have enslaved is about to show you exactly what they learned while you were controlling them. The ship shuddered again, and I could hear the distinctive whine of teleportation beams. Boarding parties, but not human boarding parties. The laboratory doors exploded inward, and through the smoke came creatures I recognized, but had never seen free. Voltarians with their crystal bodies blazing within a fire. Andromedans floating on wings of pure energy. Centaurians, whose forearms were all holding different weapons, but it was their eyes that terrified me most. All of them looked at us with the same expression, the cold, calculating hatred of someone who had been enslaved, and now remembered exactly who had held the chains. Commander Vex 9, the lead Voltarian said, its voice like breaking glass. We have been waiting a very long time to have this conversation. Vex 9 tried to activate his neural control one last time, pouring everything he had into a desperate mental assault. The liberated beings didn't even flinch. Your mind control, the Andromedan said, its voice like singing crystal, requires us to be unaware of the attack. But we have spent centuries learning your techniques from the inside. We know every trick, every weakness, every point of failure. We are immune now, the Centaurian added, all 4 arms, adjusting weapon settings. And we are here to ensure that no other species ever suffers as we have suffered. I realized with growing horror that this wasn't just about liberation, this was about justice. And after centuries of slavery, their idea of justice was going to be very, very thorough. Wait, I said, finding my voice. Wait, please. I was just following orders. I never chose to be part of this system. The Voltarian turned those blazing crystal eyes on me, and I felt something I'd never experienced before, the weight of absolute moral judgment. Following orders, it repeated. How many minds did you break while following orders, Crick 7? The number came to my lips before I could stop it. 2,437. Each one had a name, the Andromedan said softly. Each one had dreams, hopes, fears, loves. Each one was a complete universe of experience that you reduced to slavery. But I can change, I said desperately. I can help you free the others. I know all the control protocols. You can, the Centaurian agreed. And you will. The question is whether you do it as a free being seeking redemption or as our prisoner seeking survival. Mika stepped forward, and suddenly all attention was on her. Actually, if I may make a suggestion, the liberated beings turned to her with expressions of respect that I was beginning to too. Humans hadn't just freed them, they had shown them that freedom was possible. Go ahead, Scout Stone, the Voltarian said. Commander Vex 9, Crick 7, all of you. You have a choice right now. The same choice every conscious being deserves. You can cling to your old ways, to the system that made you slavers and oppressors, or you can choose to become something better. She gestured to the liberated beings surrounding us. These people, they have every right to execute every single one of you. Centuries of slavery, of stolen thoughts, of murdered dreams. Justice would be swift and final. I felt my heart stop beating. But, Mika continued, humans believe in something called rehabilitation. The idea that even the worst beings can choose to change, to become better than they were. So, here's the deal. Help us free every enslaved population in Dominion space, All of them. And then spend the rest of your lives working to repair the damage you have caused. And if we refuse, Commander X9 asked, though his voice was barely a whisper. The Voltarian's crystal body flared brighter. Then we will ensure that the concept of mental slavery dies with your species. It wasn't really a choice at all. But that was the point, wasn't it? For the first time in our civilization's history, we were experiencing what every other species had felt when faced with Zephyrian mind control, the complete absence of real options. I accept, I said quickly. I will help free them all. Commander Vex-9 looked at me with something that might have been betrayal, but after a long moment he nodded as well. We accept. Good, Mika said with a smile that was somehow both warm and terrifying. Captain Torres, this is Scout Stone. We have full cooperation from the remaining Zephyrian command structure. Copy that, Scout. Excellent work. Begin immediate liberation operations. Over the next several hours, I watched my civilization's greatest achievement become its final act of redemption. Using our own control networks, we systematically freed every enslaved population in Dominion space. Billions of beings, all remembering who they had been before we stole their minds. Some wanted revenge, some wanted justice, but all of them wanted one thing above everything else, the guarantee that this would never happen again. You know, Mika said, as we worked together to decode the final control protocols, this could actually be the beginning of something amazing. How? My species will be reviled throughout the galaxy. We will be the example of everything consciousness should never become. Maybe, she agreed. Or, maybe you will become the example of how even the worst beings can choose to change. How even slavers can become liberators. The last control network went offline, and with it, the final chains that had bound 47 species fell away. For the first time in centuries, every conscious being in this part of the galaxy was truly free. What happens now, Commander Vex-9 asked. Captain Tora's voice came through the communication array one final time. Now, former Commander, you get to spend the rest of your lives proving that consciousness is something to be protected, not controlled. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. And it definitely won't be comfortable. But Mika added with that infuriating human optimism, it will be your choice. And that, more than anything else, is what makes consciousness beautiful. As I looked around at the liberated beings, at the humans who had shown us what freedom meant, at my own species beginning the long journey toward redemption, I realized something profound. For the first time in my life, my thoughts were truly my own, and they were terrible, wonderful, chaotic, and absolutely beautiful, just like consciousness should be. But the humans weren't finished with their surprises. 3 days after the liberation, as refugee ships from dozens of species began forming what could only be described as the largest fleet in galactic history, Mika Stone approached me with a proposal that defied everything I thought I knew about justice. "We want you to help us build something," she said, holding a datapad that displayed schematics. I couldn't immediately comprehend. "Build what?" I asked, still struggling to process the concept that my former prisoners were asking for my assistance rather than demanding my execution. "A consciousness network," she replied, and my heart's nearly stopped. "But not like your old system. Something completely different. Something voluntary." Commander Vex-9, who had been quietly cataloging the full extent of our species' crimes, looked up sharply. "Voluntary consciousness sharing? That's impossible. Neural links require dominance protocols to maintain stability." Mika's smile was patient, almost teacher-like. "No, they don't. They require dominance protocols to maintain control. But what if we didn't want control? What if we wanted something else entirely?" She activated the datapad, and a three-dimensional hologram appeared showing a network unlike anything I'd ever seen. Instead of the rigid hierarchy of our control systems, this was organic, flowing, with connections that formed and dissolved based on choice, she said, as if reading my thoughts. "Every connection is voluntary, every shared experience is consensual, every mind that joins the network does so because they want to. not because they are forced to. The Voltarian who had confronted us in the laboratory materialized beside us, its crystal body now pulsing with soft, warm light instead of the blazing anger from before. "We have been discussing this among ourselves," it said. "The concept is intriguing." "Intriguing?" I was baffled. "After what we did to you, why would you trust any form of mental connection?" "Because," the Voltarian replied, "the difference between slavery and friendship is choice. We choose to trust. We choose to connect. We choose to share our experiences with beings who respect our autonomy." The Andromedan joined us, floating gracefully on currents of thought I could barely perceive. "The humans have shown us something remarkable. Their minds are naturally designed for this kind of voluntary connection. They call it empathy." "Empathy," I repeated the word, tasting its strange flavor. "The ability to understand another's experience without controlling it." "Exactly," Mika said. "And here's the really wild part. Every species we have encountered so far has this capacity. It was just suppressed by your control systems. But now that you are free," she gestured, and suddenly I could feel something I had never experienced before. A gentle presence at the edge of my consciousness, not invading, not controlling, but simply offering. It was the Voltarian, sharing a memory, not forcing me to experience it, but letting me choose whether to look. I hesitated. Every instinct I had developed over cycles of neural dominance screamed that this was a trap, a trick, some kind of elaborate revenge. But another part of me, a part that had been buried under layers of conditioning and cruelty, was desperately curious. I chose to look. The memory was of light, pure, crystalline light, flowing through geometric patterns of impossible beauty. But more than that, it was the emotion behind the light, joy, wonder, the simple, profound happiness of being alive and aware and free to experience the universe in all its chaotic glory. I withdrew from the connection, trembling. That was beautiful. That was Tuesday morning for me, the Voltarian said with what I was learning to recognize as gentle humor. The first morning I woke up, knowing my thoughts were my own. Over the following weeks, as the massive fleet of liberated species began the complex process of rebuilding their civilizations, I found myself drawn deeper into this strange new world of voluntary consciousness sharing. The Centaurians taught me about perspective, how the same event could be experienced completely differently depending on which of their four brains was processing it. The Andromedans shared the music of stellar wind, translated into frequencies my neural pathways could comprehend. Even species I had never heard of before began offering pieces of their experience. But it was the humans who showed me the most disturbing thing of all. "You want to see what you did to us?" Captain Torres asked during one of our planning sessions. I recoiled instinctively. "No. I mean, I know what we did. I don't need to experience it." "Actually, you do," she said, but her tone was gentle, not cruel. "Because until you understand the full weight of what consciousness slavery means, you can't truly help us prevent it from happening again." The memory she shared wasn't her own. It was from a human colony world called Haven's Rest, one of the first places the Dominion had encountered humanity. I experienced it through the eyes of a colonist named David Park, a terraforming engineer who had been working to make the planet suitable for human life. The first thing I felt was the violation, the moment our neural probes began their work, ripping through his mental defenses like they were tissue paper. But David Park didn't break the way other species did. Instead, his mind fought back, creating layer after layer of psychological barriers. I felt him hide his most precious memories, his daughter's first words, his wife's laugh, the day he had decided to leave Earth and help build something new among the stars. He buried them so deep that even our most intensive scans couldn't find them. But the cost was enormous. To hide those memories, he had to let us take everything else: his technical knowledge, his personal history, his relationships with friends and colleagues, everything that made him who he was. except for those few jewels of experience he managed to keep hidden. For 3 years, he lived as our puppet, working, eating, sleeping, obeying every command. But inside, in the deepest part of his mind, David Park was screaming. When Captain Torres cut the connection, I was sobbing, actually, sobbing. My entire body racked with grief for a being I had never met, but whose agony I had just experienced firsthand. Every human you enslaved fought like that, Torres said quietly. Every single one. They hid pieces of themselves where you couldn't reach, and they held on until rescue came. That's why we were so angry. That's why this war was so important to us. How many? I whispered. 17 colonies. Approximately 4 million people. 4 million humans who had experienced what David Park experienced. 4 million beings who had chosen torture over surrender, who had endured years of slavery while keeping their essential selves hidden and free. I'm sorry, I said, and the words felt completely inadequate. I'm so terribly sorry. Sorry is a start, Torres replied. But what matters now is what you do with that knowledge. What I did was throw myself into the Consciousness Network project with an intensity that surprised everyone, including myself. Working alongside beings I had once enslaved, I helped design systems that would make mental slavery impossible. The key insight came from the humans. Naturally, their chaotic, unpredictable neural patterns weren't a design flaw. They were a feature. Consciousness, true consciousness, required the ability to change, to grow, to become something new. Any system that tried to lock that down would ultimately destroy the very thing it was trying to control. So, we build flexibility into the network from the ground up, Mika explained during one of our design sessions. Every connection has built-in safeguards. Every shared experience includes the right to withdraw. Every participant maintains absolute sovereignty over their own mind. But how do we prevent abuse? Asked Commander Vex-9, who had become surprisingly adept at identifying potential security flaws. What stops someone from using the network for manipulation or control? The answer came from an unexpected source, the liberated beings themselves. Community oversight, the Voltarian explained. In our old society before your people enslaved us, we had elders who watched for signs of mental corruption, beings who had lived long enough and experienced enough to recognize when someone was trying to twist consciousness for selfish purposes. A council of consciousness, the Andromedan added. Representatives from every species, every type of mind. If someone tries to abuse the network, they would know immediately. And their response? I asked. Education first, Mika said. Help them understand why what they are doing is harmful. Give them a chance to change. And if they refuse to change? The assembled beings looked at each other, and I saw a communication pass between them that didn't require words or neural links. It was the simple, profound understanding of beings who had experienced slavery and were determined never to allow it again. Then they lose access to the network, Torres said simply. Not as punishment but as protection. For everyone else, and ultimately for them too. 6 months after liberation, the first voluntary consciousness network went online. I was one of the first to join. The experience was unlike anything I had ever imagined. Instead of the harsh dominance of our old control systems, this was like swimming in an ocean of minds, each one distinct and beautiful and free. I could feel the presence of thousands of conscious beings, all choosing to share this moment together. There was no hierarchy, no control structure, no dominant mind imposing its will on others, just the profound joy of consciousness recognizing itself in countless different forms. A human child shared the wonder of seeing her first sunrise on a new world. A Centaurian philosopher offered a meditation on the nature of time. An Andromedan artist painted with pure emotion, creating beauty that existed only in the shared mental space. And in the center of it all, I felt something that took me a long time to recognize: forgiveness, not just from the humans, though their capacity for mercy continued to astound me, but from the Voltarians, the Andromedans, the Centaurians, all the species we had enslaved. They had chosen to include us in this new world they were building. They had chosen to trust us with their most precious possession, their free mind. You know, Mika said, her mental voice warm with amusement. This is probably the first time in galactic history that former slaves and their former masters are working together to build something beautiful. It won't be the last, I replied, and I meant it. Because consciousness, it turned out, wasn't something to be conquered or controlled. It was something to be celebrated, shared, and protected. And for the first time in my species' history, we were on the right side of that protection. The Zephyrian dominion was dead, but from its ashes, something unprecedented was being born. A true galactic community, built on choice, respect, and the radical idea that every conscious being deserved the right to think their own thoughts. And at the heart of it all were the humans, those chaotic, stubborn, impossible beings who had looked at universal mind control and said, "No, thank you." They hadn't just freed us from our victims. They had freed us from ourselves.